I remember as a dad having moments like that, like with my son, or all of them have experienced my adverse reaction in those moments. Has the car left the garage for me in terms of reparenting children or being there later in their life?
Hello and welcome to Separate Bathrooms. We would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, of which we're recording this podcast on, and the traditional custodians of this land, and pay our respects to the elders both past and present. I'm Ali Daddo.
I'm Cameron Daddo, just sorting through my notes here.
We got lots of notes today because we got a great person we're about to talk to.
We do. Dr. Tina Sherma-Sellers is with us today. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist, a certified sex therapist, and certified sex therapy supervisor.
Dr. Tina has taught as a professor for at least 30 years in marriage and family therapy and sexuality. Now, today you can find her at the Northwest Institute on Intimacy. Who knew that there was an Institute on Intimacy, which she actually founded, and it's dedicated to empowering therapists to provide excellent levels of care to their clients around topics of sexuality and intimacy.
Yeah, Dr. Tina has a new bestseller out. It's called Shameless Parenting, Everything You Need to Raise Shame-Free, Confident Kids and Heal Your Shame Too. I get the feeling that we're going to be talking a lot about sex and shame today.
Let's dive in. Please welcome Dr. Tina Sherma-Sellers to the bathroom.
Hi, Dr. Tina. Welcome. Welcome to Australia.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here with you guys.
Where are you coming from?
My voice and body are currently in Sandy, Oregon, in the United States, in the Pacific Northwest, where we get lots of rain and we have lots of green and healthy vegetation, flora and fauna to speak for our rain and soil. So it's a rich place of a lot of love, but you got to be a hearty soul to live here.
Oh, you do?
I would say.
Why is that?
Well, just because the weather is,
Sure.
you know, if you're somebody that's going to melt under rain, you'll melt here.
You don't want to be the Green Witch in The Wizard of Oz.
No, you don't want to be the Wicked Witch of the West for sure. So some people, you know, find ways to just, you know, buckle down during the winter months, get things done. And then as soon as the sun comes out, they're like, okay, I'm working 25%.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be outside getting dirty and having fun. You know, that's the way lots of people are around here.
We've spent some time recently in Scotland and Ireland, and I personally love colder weather and rain. So I know I would love Oregon, but they say over there, there's no such thing as bad weather. It's just not having the right clothes. So I think we can can apply that to Oregon.
Right. I was teaching my granddaughters the concept of liquid sunshine when we walked out of a play about a month ago. And I said, see this? We call this liquid sunshine.
I love that. That's awesome.
We're here to talk about what you do. We read in our intro that you're a licensed marriage and family therapist, a certified sex therapist. So we want to talk about that sort of stuff today.
Great.
Firstly, though, how did you come to be in this profession?
Well, I always say that the profession kind of chose me, and life kept pointing me in particular directions. So I started out a junior high and high school teacher, and adolescents just warm my heart, and they don't everybody's heart, but I just find them very wise and right in this sweet spot of still having some of that innocence and diversity of thinking, while at the same time beginning to ask questions. And I think often they're important questions for us to be asking. And so I really like to hang out with them. It was in hanging out with and teaching adolescents for a couple of years out of college, I noticed that whatever was going on at home that was concerning to them would affect their learning. It was like a white noise machine was getting turned on and it got in the way. what I decided at that point, I was in my late 20s at the time, like I was going to go back to graduate school and study family therapy so that I had the opportunity to intervene at that level of what's going on here that's making it stressful and difficult, and because your kiddo's absorbing it, basically.
Yeah.
So did that, got involved in I became a licensed marriage and family therapist. I got hired to teach in the graduate program that I had just finished graduating from. But the thing I was doing also was I was asked to teach the graduate level human sexuality course for therapists in our program because it was a required course for licensure. I didn't realize at this moment in my history that I was excited to do these things because I had grown up in a very odd family. I thought my family was perfectly normal.
Right.
We all
As,
do, though.
you know.
We all think our families are normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I had grown up in a Swedish immigrant home. And per all of our, bones in the closet, if you will, the one thing it had really going for it was generations, like epigenetics of sex and body positivity. And so I talked to my grandparents, my great aunts and uncles, my parents about whatever, and they talked freely about things in front of me. And if I didn't understand or they wanted to explain it, they put it in my language so I would understand. And I thought every family was like this. And so when I thought about teaching, I'm like, oh, sure, that just sounds really fun. We had a secret question box. Anybody could ask any question and we would sit and figure it out. And if we didn't know, I'd go look for the answer for them or, whatever. So I jumped at this to start teaching this class in the graduate marriage and family therapy program. And this was in the early 90s. And one of the assignments I had my students do was write their sexual autobiography. Now, most people, when they think about committing that to paper, freak out, right?
Yeah.
But I would say to them, you're only ever as good a therapist as you know what your stories are, where you begin and end and your clients begin and end. Otherwise, you're going to get them confused. So I started teaching this in 92. Around the year 2000, the tone of these papers began to really shift. They started describing themselves as perverted, feeling disgusted about themselves, feeling really embarrassed about what they were writing down. And yet the stories, in essence, were falling in that same sort of range of common. So I couldn't figure out why the tone was changing so much. And so literally I would read these and be crying because I would be so sad for these, late 20-year-olds, early 30-year-olds about how much they hated themselves or how badly they felt or what they didn't do. And I was just like, this is a beautiful part of you. I don't understand. And so I just started doing some digging and I realized I was hitting the first wave of students that had been raised in abstinence-only education, which started sweeping the United States in the 80s. It peaked around the early 90s. So these kiddos would have been 15 around that time, right? They're now 25 or so, 25 to 30, somewhere in there. And there were two things that began happening. We withdrew money for all research that was going on around sexuality in the United States. We started selling this idea that sex was dangerous and was going to kill you. Now, mind you, 1980, AIDS hit the East Coast. 1985, it hit the West Coast. We also had an economic downturn around that time, and we had a reaction to second wave feminism. So you have a scared public.
Yeah.
And that is the perfect bait for people in power who are trying to push their agenda to create an agenda on the surface that supports their underground agenda. That's all about, we're going to take care of you. So that was the beginning of family values in the United States, right? And so it took me a bit to discover all of this. And as I did, and I was looking at, I was hearing stories for the kids that were not just in public schools, but maybe also were involved in youth groups, telling me stories about, sitting around while a pastor was talking about, the dangers of sex and how you'll ruin your future. And they were asking them to glue contrasting pieces to paper together. And at the end of the hour, asking them to take them apart, or passing around a flower and asking them to take the petals off, or passing around a piece of foil and asking them to crumble it up and then open it up. And basically saying, this is what will be of value of you if you give away yourself emotionally, physically, spiritually, whatever that means, right?
Yeah.
And so what I was seeing was sexual dysfunction issues I had not ever seen before in kids in their 20s at all.
Hmm.
And this just hyper fear around the dangers of their bodies and sexuality. And there's some really interesting messages that were getting supported, different for those that were cis het male,
Yeah.
right, than those that were cis het female. They were getting, the sort of dominant messages were really different. Like men were not to be trusted. They could not control themselves. If they did something they shouldn't, it was going to be her fault, And so then I just started speaking about it, writing about it, keeping actual research notes, and realized as I wrote, I think 2006, I was asked to write my first article that was covering a more broad market. And I said, all I'm going to do is I'm going to write what I have been seeing. I'm not coming from any expert place, but this is what I'm seeing, and I'm seeing it a lot. The article was called Christians Caught Between the Sheets, How an Abstinence-Only Ideology Hurts Us. And I started hearing from people literally around the globe. And I realized, okay, I'm tapping into something that is prevalent and we're just not talking about it yet. And that was the beginning. And so then it took me 11 years to write the first book, trying to just shape what was going on.
Well, you've done an extraordinary job in the last 5 minutes of just detailing
Incredible.
the economic side of things, the political side of things, where the church fits in, the education, and how when you prey on fear. And you said something really interesting. In our time in the States, we always joked about when we watched the evening news, how it was all about how they were going to save us. So even if it was a sprinkle on the 405 freeway, a sprinkle of rain, it was, we'll show you how to survive the torrential downpour, and it was this whole thing. It was like, are you kidding? It's just sprinkling on the freeway. What's going on? Wow. I've never heard it actually put
That's brilliant.
like that. I'm going to have to re-listen to it, because clearly your 10 years of putting it all together, you've done a really wonderful job.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thanks. Well, and we're seeing it continue, right? Because it's like they're preying on the amygdala, right? It's interesting. I was at the grocery store today and I picked up a new National Geographic, that had just come out, and it's all on the brain. And one of the articles is "Hurt Brains Hurt People."
Yeah. Yeah.
That sums up so much of what's happening in our culture. We have just so much trauma.
Yeah.
Some of those people are privileged white men, privileged white women in particular. And we can see the pain that they cause because they have power, right? And they were traumatized children, traumatized, not given enough, right? And they're still trying to make up for, tell me I'm important, so ethics out the door, morals out the door, And I thought, okay, I'm getting that, because I want to read how they decided to talk about this, because it is true. You can take somebody, and then we've got all these people that listen to fear-based stuff and they believe that it's true. And it's like, you have to understand that this is about how many viewers can they get so they make more money for their stockholders. Doesn't have to do with giving you the news anymore.
Yeah. We're facing an epidemic at the moment, or what they're calling an epidemic, of women dying at the hands of their intimate partner. But the domestic violence has gone through the roof, particularly since COVID. We have a big footy game on and the rates of domestic violence goes up like some crazy amount.
Yeah.
And Australia's really looking at the changes to be made. And as you've said, women are just crying out. There hasn't been enough done already. And what changes are you really going to make? Because it's so systematic.
Yeah.
And it really, I think, to your point, it goes back way beyond what the problem is today. You've got to take it way back to how were these men raised? What were they taking in? What was their visual stimulation? And, and I think to me, that's where we need to be teaching our young boys what is happening and what's going on for you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's two documentaries actually done by the Representation Project. And one was done called Misrepresentation on Women, the Effect of Media on Women. And I would say American media, except for that America has this wide influence on so many other countries, right? And then about 5 years later, they came out with one called The Mask You Live In on media's effect on boys and sort of the boy club that will get started, right? As boys get into their teens and they're trying to belong, they're belonging in a way in which they're joining around violence against women. Women are objects for our pleasure, however we wish to get it, and we aren't responsible. We can't help ourselves,
Yeah.
right? And this is supported, that thinking is supported by quote unquote evangelical Christianity in the United States as well, and many of our political leaders, because the church and the state crawled into bed together with Ronald Reagan in 1980.
Yeah.
And that may be like a lot of people go, oh my gosh, how can you say that? Do you know that no president prior to Ronald Reagan had ever used God language in the United States? Never said, God
Wow.
bless America. Never. And this has been studied. We have books on this where political speeches by presidents have been studied, and not any until then. It was a ploy. It was the beginning of how he was a puppet for the religious right and the moral majority at that time to pursue and punctuate the capitalistic agenda in the United States.
Hey, we are a relationship podcast, and we're talking a lot. We're big, broad subjects so far.
Yeah.
One thing that we do want to speak about today is you mentioned the word or the phrase sexual shame. That's underpinning a lot of what you've been talking about over the last few minutes. Can you talk to us about sexual shame? What is it? And I mean, this is a big question. How are we taught to be ashamed of sex? That's how most of us got here.
Yeah, I love both those questions. And there are a few things that I love talking about more than both of those questions. It's so widespread. And the people who have been working hard to heal their heart and mind and body and life from sexual shame really don't want to pass that on and don't know how to do it different. So what I'd love to do is share with you the researched operational definition of sexual shame. We didn't have one until 2017.
Oh my gosh.
Spring of 2017.
Yeah.
And someone who had been following my work and wanted to study religious sexual shame realized when she got into the literature that there was no operational definition of sexual shame yet. And I said, you're going to have to start there. And people will build upon it. So it's really the definition that came out of her interviews was so stunning to me. I can remember I was returning home from a speaking engagement. I was on a plane and I'm sitting and reading her dissertation. And I just like had to hold myself together because it was like there in black and white was everything I had been seeing that I had never put in such a succinct way. Sexual shame is a visceral feeling. So in your body, visceral feeling of humiliation and disgust toward one's own body and identity as a sexual being, and a belief that you are abnormal, inferior, and unworthy. And that's what I was seeing. This feeling can be internalized, so it often is internalized, but also manifests in interpersonal relationships, having a negative impact on trust, communication, and physical and emotional intimacy. So I often say, I don't know how you hurt someone more than hurting them there, because now you've affected their ability to give and receive love. I worked in oncology for a decade, and I can tell you what people care about when they think they're going to die. They care about the quality of their relationships. Nothing else, right? Sexual shame develops across the lifespan in interactions with interpersonal relationships. That's where it starts, okay? A child finds their vulva or their penis and they're 11 months old. Pre-verbal, right? But they now can control their hand. And they're with somebody where that freaks them out.
Yeah.
And that person, that loved one, gets angry, slaps their hand away, raises their voice, gets a scowl on their face, something that scares this little one. But their brain development isn't such that the child stops. They will do it over and over and over and over again until they're about 5 and they get in trouble for playing doctor, which is developmentally on task, right?
Mm.
Then they'll remember that story. They'll often say that was their first story. And I'm always like, that wasn't your first. That was your 1,001st probably time. You just don't remember the ones before. So we have to remember this is pre-verbal. It goes like this, right? So lifespan in interactions with interpersonal relationships, then one's culture and society. In America, we drive our economy on helping you feel badly about yourself, right? Because that's how you'll spend money,
Yes.
right? If you feel bad enough about you
I
need
think
new
it's the
clothes,
same
you
here
need
in
a new
Australia.
facelift, you need whatever.
Yeah.
Right? We drive and that's not changing. Drive our economy that way, right? Once culture and society layers on top of that, and then it creates a subsequent critical self-appraisal. In other words, the inner critic gets going. By the time you're adult, that's who's on you all the time. So then it goes on to say there is also a fear and uncertainty related to one's power or right to make decisions, including safety decisions related to sexual encounters, along with an internalized judgment toward one's own sexual desire. So Peggy Ornstein, who's a New York Times reporter and writer and brilliant, wrote a book called Girls and Sex. About 5 years later, she wrote a book called Boys and Sex. And similar to those documentaries, they really talk. She interviewed a ton of kids, like 80 girls, 15 to 22, I think 105 boys, 15 to 22. But basically, you saw the same stuff that was showing up in those documentaries, showing up in her writing. And one of the things that came out when she was in the girls' book was she said she was talking to these girls who seemed competent and confident in every area of their life until they got ready to go out. And then they were putting down 3, 4, and 5 shots of hard liquor because they didn't know if they had the right to keep themselves safe or if they could keep themselves safe. So this is Dr. Noelle Clarke's work. So as in her work, as in Peggy Ornstein's work, the bulk of the people they interviewed did not self-describe themselves as coming from religious backgrounds. So this is the effect of a country that has had abstinence education, which we now know was religious and 80% medically inaccurate, right? It was religious education that went out across everyone while we were increasing violence against women and holding men less accountable. So these things were happening. And those people who were involved with the church just got a whole nother layer on top of it, if that makes sense. So sexual shame affects you at where you do bonding and attachment, the place where our happiness comes from. So this is why I get so passionate, because I'm like, we are affecting people's ability to live, truly live their one miraculous, beautiful, incredible life. And they're going to figure it out the last 10 years of their life, and the regret will be so great because they could have loved so much more, but they didn't know how to read the signs in the culture of what the culture was doing to manipulate them for its own benefit.
And I would imagine that it's not even, a lot of people aren't even aware that they're in sexual shame anyway, because she feels like the same as me, he feels like the same as him. So we're all just in it together in so many ways without actually realizing we've disconnected from a huge part of ourselves.
Right, exactly. I mean, it really involves a lot of deep conversation.
Yeah.
Where do I feel okay to just be me? Like, how do I feel about my body, right? I talk about in the book, Sex, God, and the Conservative Church, Erasing Shame from Sexual Intimacy, I talk about there are ways that you can heal sexual shame. It doesn't happen overnight. It took a long time to develop, right? But I developed a model called Healing the Mess, the model for erasing sexual shame, MESS. And it's 4 things. It's frame, name, claim, and aim. And frame is start by getting yourself a scaffolding or a framework of sex education so that you can start to say, oh, that was BS that I learned. Oh, wow, I didn't know that. I thought this. I learned this from porn or whatever. And I thought that I didn't know that. Like, get yourself that education. right? That we failed to give you. And then second, tell your story to someone who can be loving and compassionate and empathic. If that's a therapist, if that's a good friend, whatever, tell your story because you're going to find out you're not alone.
Yeah.
I ask people all the time, and when I'm speaking or whatever, like, how many people here grew up in homes that they felt free to talk about anything, that they were given the education? Hands rarely go up. So I'm like 90 to 95% of people in the US grew up in homes that are silent and shaming, right? Then I'm like, okay, so after that, claim your body is good. No matter how it is, if it's a good body, if you get up in the morning and you are not in horrible pain, if it's a good body, then you get to, I often say, your body is the pen that you write the poetry of your life. Without our bodies, we can't hug, we can't talk, we can't do this that we're doing right now. Like, we can't share ourselves with the world and take in the world, So our bodies, no matter what, and we drive our economy on something that most people can't be anyway. And I'm always like, no matter how you are, your heredity is determining how your body is right now more than anything else.
Yeah.
I'm a Swede. I look like my relatives. I go to Sweden. I look like everybody that's around. And I'm like, okay, this is really the way it is. Learn to see this as good, learn to see it as good. And then when you're doing those things over and over again, because it is something that you're working, really it's a practice that you're working, what you'll do is you'll begin to aim for a whole new sexual health legacy for yourself and then anybody that you get close to and you're talking to. You're like, wait, I'm starting to question this. Oh, how is this? You just start to rewrite it. And that's really, the second book I wrote, Shameless Parenting, came about because I had people saying to me, I don't want to do to my kids what was done to me. Help me know what to do. And I was like, I got you. I've been teaching this to doctors and stuff forever. I will write you a book. It'll be birth to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, up to 18. It's going to say, here are the natural behavioral curiosities that kids have, emotional things that are going on the inside that's developing. We're going to then shape as to helping you understand what is typical for that age. All you have to do is be 2 years ahead of your kid. You don't have to have it all figured out. Know that anytime you have a reaction on your inside that's like, I don't know, just know that was because someone shamed you when you were that age. That's just your normal body response. So I always say, put your hand on your heart and tell yourself you're good. You are good and you are fine. And whoever this little person is in front of you, take a deep breath. And even if it doesn't match your insides, put on a happy face. And then just be curious. Just be like, oh, can you tell me more? Oh, just anything to just pass the first 60 seconds, 120 seconds, let your heart calm down. You're good. They're good.
Yeah.
They need something different than somebody jumping down their throat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got 3 grown kids. Our oldest is 28. Our youngest is 18. As you're talking about moments like that, I remember as a dad having moments like that, like with my son, or all of them have experienced my adverse reaction in those moments where I haven't known to put my hand on my heart and say, you're okay, or also reflect that, Jesus, that happened to me when I was 8 years old.
Yeah.
And so it's a beautiful way. Has the car left the garage for me in terms of reparenting children or being there later, in their life?
That's like a sweet question. You, I'm sure, have both already noticed that your relationship with adult children or becoming adult children is not the same as when they're little.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right? You navigate it different. You listen more and you ask more questions because you're inviting them to wrestle rather than telling them what to do.
Yeah.
And so what I'll often say to people is be transparent. Like, go to the library and get some of the kid books, and be like, I wish I had this when you were little. I
Mm.
wish so much I had this when you were little, because this is what I'm learning now. And it feels more affirming of who you are as a person and your own development. And I just didn't know it then. And I
Yeah.
was going off my reactions of how I was parented, and I didn't know. But if I had to do it over, this is what I do. We'd read this book together, or we would, do this thing. And I say, do it, like
Mm.
just what do you think how do you think it would have been different for you if we could have read this when you were 4
Yeah.
or 6 or 8 or 10? How do you think things would have been different? And just be brave enough to hear what they're going to say, because these conversations will help them have different conversations in the future
That's right. Yeah.
with any child that might be in their life.
Yeah.
And that's valuable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have bookend daughters, so a 28 and an 18-year-old. And by no means am I an expert or in any way, shape, or form healed all of my sexual shame. But I've read just enough. I've read Emily Nagoski's book, who I just
Right.
love, Come As You Are, and sort of heard more and understood a little bit more about my own sexuality and what I did and didn't understand, and the difference between how we parented the eldest to the youngest is, for me, it's really interesting. Our youngest has so much less of the shame and the freedom, the ability to love her body. And because she is that way, and we just love that she's been encouraged more and more, because we've just looked at her and gone, this is amazing. Wow. And
Yeah.
it breaks my heart that we didn't have that knowledge for our other two. But as you say, what you're talking about is not too late. There's conversations still to be
Yeah.
had, which I love that.
Yeah. And there is beauty and redemption. There's so much good in having the conversations later. It's like, I think I was always trying to do the best I could with what I have. And now as I learn these different things, I
Yeah.
wish that I had them. You're just open about it. And what you're modeling for them is that you are an evolving human. They are going to be an evolving human, and you can have transparent conversations with the people you love,
Yeah.
and that can continue. And I think that's brilliant modeling for them. It says I'm not expecting me to have it all together at any particular point, and I'm not expecting you to either, whatever that means. Or people will use the word like, well, I'm not perfect. And I'm like, yeah, you wouldn't be able to be human if you were perfect, because
Yeah.
humans can't be perfect.
That's right.
We're in evolution.
Yeah. Yeah. We were having a discussion the other day, Cam and I, about monogamy. And this one person in the relationship was saying that they don't believe that humans are monogamous, that swans are, penguins are, but humans are not monogamous. And the other person in the relationship completely believes in monogamy. What's your feeling about that? Do you feel like it's a relationship that's bound to explode, or how do those two people get on the same page?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think anybody can say humans are XYZ.
Mm.
There's too much variability and diversity in the human creature. And I think that's how we're supposed to be. That's how the world is. But there are people who believe that they are polyamorous, that they have the heart to love many people and really want that experience of loving many people, whether that's some of those relationships are sexual or some of them are not. It doesn't really matter, but that's how they want to live their life. There are other people, and I'm going to make this really bifurcated, although I think people can change over, the course of a life, who are like, it takes a lot to do polyamorous relationships well. A lot of communication, a lot of being upfront, a lot of staying on top of things. I really don't have the desire or energy to do more than one person. It just feels too hard to me. I think for whatever reason, I like doing just one person at a time or whatever. That's what they like too. Okay, that's fine. But when you've got two people that agreed on monogamy, now they're in a monogamous relationship, and one is saying, I think I'm learning I'm not monogamous. The other person has to decide, am I okay with I want to just be with that one person, but I'm okay with them being with other people. And if they can't be okay in a real true sense, then they might be better off to find somebody who's can match them a
Yeah.
little bit more.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of just looking at what are the gains and losses going to be. Do you imagine for you over the next year? What about 5 years? Hard to know, 10 years, but what do you think? Can you stretch to match that and be truly okay with that? Or does that feel like that would be breaking, your internal compass somehow to do that? I mean, we
I
have,
guess
and
it
for both,
Yeah.
for both of them are saying, I have an internal compass that's pulling me here.
it really does stay true to that. Be true to yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Follow your
Mhm.
gut. Be true to yourself.
Yeah. And I'm often just encouraging people, what is growth? Let's assume that you want to keep growing your whole life. Like you want to keep evolving. What does growth right now look to you? What does that look like to you? And does that include being able to stretch in this way? Or does it feel like that can't be part of it? Or, would be somehow an affront to your soul? Let's try to just individually look at yourselves, because ultimately you're going to be responsible for crafting the life that works for you, is right for you. And I'm often saying to people, and I want to invite you into the idea that your most attached relationships, whether they're love relationships, family of origin relationships, children, your most attached relationships are going to push you to grow. They're meant to hold a mirror up to you and say, girlfriend, you are stubborn. You are stubborn, sweet.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. Actually, I am. And I need to look at that, right? Like that's what we do. That's what happens in
Yeah.
love relationships, whether, again, no matter how that attachment is, they in time are going to invite you to grow. So when I say those things, crafting the life that's right for you, I'm not thinking it's an easy life. I'm believing that it's a life worth living. It's crafting your evolution and development so that when you go to your grave, you've been doing good work in the world and in you and in your relationships as well.
Beautiful.
A lot of our listeners are our age and have been in long-term relationships. We get a lot of emails about this. Ali and I have been married for over 30 years. Can you give us your thoughts on how to foster intimacy and keep this growth going, as you say? How do you foster intimacy and sexual health through the long term?
Well, first off, I think that you have to be doing your own work, and you've got to be willing to keep looking at how are you fostering safety, intimacy, love in your relationship. So if you find yourself in places where you just want to be defensive, it's a matter of getting underneath it and trying to get at what does creating safety here look like for you and for me and for us, so that you are free to speak and be truthfully yourself, and I am too. In the book, I think the 7th chapter of the Sex, God, and Conservative Church book, I talk about the anatomy of intimacy, and that anatomy is grown on 7 different domains. And when we want to grow intimacy over time, we have to look at those different domains and ask, how are we cultivating it in ourselves and with our partnership, so that I'm free to move. When we are sexual, my soul and my body feel open. I feel safe enough and trusting enough. We've been cultivating sort of goodness and sensuality and stuff enough, like desire, and so that I can now see and be reminded of the beauty in you, the beauty that I get to see, because I know you. I know these crevices. I know you. And so there's a beauty that's deeper, an aesthetic beauty that's deeper than the beauty that we sell, right? And that opens up space for ecstatic experiences to occur, where I just feel like the ineffable just happened. Like, I don't have words for this. This just felt bigger. And I'm just grateful that it's you, that you're my person, right? And so we move along those continuums, but it is predicated on us doing our own work, our emotional work.
You are a gem. In Australia, how do we get more? I mean, we can get your book. Is there, you've got a website. How do we get more of you down under?
Yeah. So Sex, God, and the Conservative Church, Erasing Shame from Sexual Intimacy will help you understand what's happened and how, if at all, you've been affected by it and how to heal. And then Shameless Parenting, Everything You Need to Raise Shame-Free, Confident Kids and Heal Your Shame Too. It's just a great, fun book that literally you'll feel like holding your hand.
Yeah.
If you ever want to reach out, you can DM me. I'm at Dr. Tina Shameless on Instagram. And then I have a website that is my name, tinashermersellers.com. A lot of free stuff that you can download. You could download a thing called the Sexual Reclamation Project, where I give a lot of those questions that I used to ask my students. So if you want to take a look at what does your arc of your story look like, you can follow that, download it for free. And just stuff. I've got stuff there that I just thrown up.
That's so generous. Thank you. Thank you so
that's
much.
the thing. I didn't want to wind you up. I didn't want to wind this up because I think we could talk for a long time. Is there anything that you say to your clients at the end of a first session that you do with them as they're walking out the door? Is there something that you could say to our listener right now as they're closing the bathroom door?
Yeah. I think goodness and abundance is available for people. It's there, and just it takes some cultivation. So find people that you can put in your inner circle if they're not there already that can support you on your own journey for abundance and joy and just goodness in your life.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, you are all those things. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time coming from beautiful Oregon, and you're a light in this world. And it's been so lovely talking with you and with all your wisdom and graciousness. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's been a joy to be with you both. And I just wish you all the best. And anytime you want to chat again, you just let me know.
Yeah,
good.
Thank you. We'll
take you up on that. We look forward to reading the books too. Ma didn't enjoy winding that interview up.
I did not want that interview to end. I really didn't. I was hanging on every word. Wow, that was so enlightening for me.
Yeah.
She has such a great way of framing things as well. And it was like she just kind of laid out this history that made so much sense, right?
That first 15 minutes was incredible.
Yeah.
Especially that she went back to Ronald Reagan. So when I went to live in America first, Ronald Reagan had just come in. And I remember him saying, "God bless America," and how impactful that was. And people latched on. And so to hear her put that in perspective with everything else, the fear-mongering, all that other stuff, and the economy of the 2008, just make that connection to all that was really incredible. Incredible work she's done.
I do feel like I want a do-over of our kids' childhood so I could raise them in a sex-positive way, without, not that we knew any better as parents do. You're doing the absolute best and just teaching them what you know, though, listening to that and understanding more as I've grown older. And it's just like, hard to look at sometimes for me.
It is, though, that's your journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's their journey too.
And the fact that, there's still things to be said and discussed, which that actually excites me, that there's more to share with our kids and more to learn and learn together in a way. And I think that that's really beautiful, her suggestions about, this is what I would have liked to have shown you when you were 4 years old. Like that's how I imagine if our parents came to us and said that would be so beautiful.
I know. And I'd do it. I would absolutely do it.
Oh, yeah.
If my folks said, let's do this. I mean, every time they make a suggestion anyway, I pretty much do it.
Yeah.
I think it's also that idea of staying curious and wanting to expand instead of get smaller in our world and go, I actually want to know more. I want to do better. I love that notion that she said also, your body is the pen you write your natural life with.
Yeah.
And here we are. If your body's working and it's okay, then you get to write your life still, you know, and use what you've got.
Yeah.
There's so much goodness in that chat. I actually have to go back and listen again because it's the great thing about a podcast. You can go back.
That's right.
It's not just a conversation you've had on the street with someone going, what does she say?
I'm going to download those questions from her website as well and ask myself those questions. And I just love that.
We should do it
great.
together. I'll go into my cave and do my answers. You go into yours. We'll share notes.
Yeah.
I think it's great. And that's the thing too, is mindfulness. I was thinking, as she was saying, you've got to do your own work. And I could feel myself going, I can't be bothered. Do I really want to be bothered doing that?
Really?
Yeah, I did. And I wonder if, I don't think I'm the only person who's thinking that way, going, oh God, do I have to do that? Yeah, I do have to do that.
Well, you don't have to.
No, but I want to do that.
Yeah,
if I want my life to expand, I need to go out on that edge, and I need to do that. I want to do that.
Yeah.
Though it's not just going to land in my lap.
Yeah.
It's an effort. And I always find that when I do make an effort at something and I come out the other side, I feel way better and excited and go, oh shit, there's a whole lot more.
And at our age, when you get to learn more and make changes, knowing that we've got another, 40 years, hopefully, that's like, why not? We're not too old to change. No. We're not too old to keep learning. And this particular subject for me holds a lot of healing, I know, for my future. So that's something I'm very curious about and wanting to know more. So, look, we really hope that you've enjoyed that clip. We loved it.
Yeah.
But as we've said, all of the notes and all of the links and everything are in the show notes about Dr. Tina. And let us know what you think about that discussion. You can find me on Instagram at Ali Dado. And
I'm at Cameron Dado.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Amazing.
So thanks so much for listening.
Yeah. Till soon. Bye.